The morning sun glinted off the tarmac as passengers boarded Flight 217 to Los Angeles. In first class, the air was thick with the scent of leather seats and expensive cologne. Among the well-heeled travelers, a quiet man in a simple cap and sunglasses took his seat by the window. He carried a worn leather handbag, its edges scuffed, its handle patched with tape. Few recognized him at first. Morgan Freeman, the legendary actor, traveling alone. Flight attendant Jessica had worked for the airline for nearly a decade. She prided herself on her professionalism, her crisp uniform, and her ability to anticipate the needs of her first-class passengers. But that morning, she was tired. Her son was sick at home, and the bills were piling up. She needed this job, and she needed to impress her supervisor, who was watching her every move. As Jessica moved down the aisle, she noticed the man with the battered bag. She frowned. First class was a place for luxury, for status. The bag looked out of place, almost shabby. She approached Morgan with a practiced smile, but her eyes lingered on the bag. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice cool. "We have a policy about carry-on items in first class. May I store your bag in the overhead compartment?" Morgan looked up, his eyes kind but tired. "I'd prefer to keep it with me, if that's all right," he replied softly. Jessica hesitated, her supervisor watching. "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. We have standards to maintain." Her words were sharper than she intended. A few passengers glanced over, sensing the tension. Morgan nodded, his expression unreadable. He handed over the bag without protest. Jessica placed it in the overhead bin, but not before a passenger whispered, "Isn't that Morgan Freeman?" The realization rippled through the cabin. Jessica's cheeks flushed. She'd just scolded a Hollywood legend over a handbag. The flight took off, but Jessica couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She replayed the moment in her mind, her words echoing with unintended harshness. She watched Morgan throughout the flight, noticing how he spoke gently to the staff, how he smiled at the nervous child across the aisle, how he never once complained. During the meal service, Jessica tried to make amends. She offered Morgan extra dessert, a warmer blanket, a quiet apology. But Morgan simply thanked her, his voice calm. "We all have our burdens," he said, glancing at the bag above. "Sometimes what we carry means more than what it looks like." Jessica felt a pang of guilt. She realized she'd judged him not by his character, but by the state of his belongings. She thought of her own life, the struggles she hid behind a polished exterior, the nights she cried over her son's fever, the fear of losing her job. She wondered what stories Morgan's bag might hold. As the flight neared Los Angeles, turbulence shook the cabin. A passenger panicked, clutching her armrest. Morgan reached across the aisle, his voice steady and reassuring. "It's all right," he said. "We're safe." His calm presence soothed the woman, and soon the cabin was quiet again. After landing, Jessica retrieved Morgan's bag, handing it to him with trembling hands. "I'm sorry for earlier," she whispered. "I shouldn't have judged." Morgan smiled, his eyes warm. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." He thanked her, then turned to help an elderly passenger with her luggage. Jessica watched him go, her heart heavy with regret, but also hope. She realized that true class wasn't about appearances, but about kindness, humility, and the courage to admit when you're wrong. She vowed to treat every passenger with the dignity they deserved, no matter what they carried. In the days that followed, Jessica's perspective shifted. She listened more, judged less, and found small ways to show compassion. she shared her story with her colleagues, encouraging them to look beyond the surface. The lesson stayed with her, a quiet reminder that everyone carries burdens unseen. Months later, Jessica received a letter from the airline's headquarters. It was a commendation, signed by Morgan Freeman himself. He praised her professionalism, her willingness to learn, and her kindness in the face of her own struggles. Jessica wept as she read the letter, grateful for the chance to grow. Her life didn't become easier overnight. Her son still got sick. The bills still came. But Jessica faced each day with a new sense of purpose. She knew that redemption was possible, that even a moment of shame could lead to transformation. She carried Morgan's words with her, a reminder that what we carry matters, and so does how we treat those who carry it. Jessica's days at work were never quite the same after that flight. She found herself looking at passengers differently, wondering about the stories behind their tired eyes or battered bags. She remembered Morgan's gentle words and how he'd comforted the anxious woman during turbulence. It struck her that true grace was quiet, never demanding attention, and often overlooked by those too busy to notice. At home, Jessica's son, Ethan, was still struggling with his health. The hospital visits and medication costs weighed heavily on her. She often felt invisible, just another face in a crowd, another worker in a uniform. But after meeting Morgan, she began to see herself and others with more compassion. She realized that everyone, no matter how polished or privileged they seemed, carried invisible burdens. One evening, after a long shift, Jessica sat at her kitchen table, sorting through bills. She thought about the passengers she'd served that day, the elderly man who needed help with his seatbelt, the young woman flying to her first job interview, the mother traveling alone with two restless children. She wondered what burdens they carried, what kindness they might need. The next morning, Jessica arrived at the airport early. She greeted her colleagues with a genuine smile, offering to help with the pre-flight checks. Her supervisor noticed the change in her demeanor. "You seem different lately," he remarked. Jessica just nodded, thinking of Morgan's words. What matters is what we do next. On her next flight, Jessica encountered a businessman who was irate about a delayed takeoff. Instead of responding defensively, she listened patiently, offering him a drink and a sincere apology. The man's anger softened, and by the end of the flight, he thanked her for her understanding. Jessica realized that small acts of empathy could diffuse even the most difficult situations. Word of Jessica's kindness began to spread among her colleagues. New flight attendants sought her advice, and she became known for her calm presence during stressful flights. She shared her story about Morgan Freeman, not as a tale of celebrity, but as a lesson in humility and redemption. "You never know who you're serving," she'd say, or what they're carrying. Meanwhile, Morgan Freeman's letter of commendation had made its way up the chain of command. The airline's CEO invited Jessica to a company event, where she was recognized for her outstanding service. Standing on stage, Jessica felt a wave of emotion. She spoke briefly, her voice trembling. "I learned that dignity isn't about what you own or how you look. It's about how you treat others, especially when no one is watching." After the ceremony, a woman approached Jessica in tears. She introduced herself as the daughter of the elderly passenger Morgan had helped on that flight. "You and Mr. Freeman made my mother feel safe and valued," she said. "Thank you for your kindness." Jessica hugged her, realizing that the ripples of a single moment could reach far beyond what she'd ever imagined. Jessica's newfound empathy extended beyond her job. She volunteered at Ethan's school, helping other single parents navigate the challenges of raising children alone. She organized a fundraiser for families struggling with medical bills, sharing her own story to inspire others. The community rallied around her, and for the first time in years, Jessica felt truly seen. One day, as she was leaving the hospital with Ethan, Jessica received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Morgan Freeman's assistant. "Mr. Freeman would like to invite you and your son to a charity gala," the assistant said. "He was deeply moved by your story." Jessica was stunned. She'd never attended such an event and worried she wouldn't fit in. But Ethan's excitement convinced her to accept. The night of the gala, Jessica wore her best dress, her nerves fluttering as she entered the grand ballroom. Morgan greeted her with a warm smile, introducing her to guests as the flight attendant who taught me something about grace. Jessica was overwhelmed by the attention, but Morgan's kindness put her at ease. He spoke about the importance of seeing beyond appearances, of treating everyone with dignity. During the gala, Morgan shared the story of his battered handbag. It had belonged to his late mother, who had carried it through years of hardship. "This bag reminds me of where I come from," he said. "It's a symbol of resilience, of love, and of the burdens we all carry." The audience listened in silence, many moved to tears. Jessica realized that the bag she'd once dismissed as shabby was, in fact, a treasure. After the event, Jessica and Morgan spoke privately. He thanked her for her honesty, for her willingness to learn and grow. "We all make mistakes," he said, "but it's what we do with those mistakes that defines us." Jessica nodded, her heart full. She knew she would never forget this lesson. Jessica returned home from the gala changed. She felt a new sense of purpose, not just in her work but in her life. She realized that her journey was not just about redemption, but about using her experience to lift others. She began mentoring new flight attendants, teaching them to look beyond uniforms and luggage, to see the person behind the passenger. Her story became a quiet legend among the crew, a reminder that every flight was a chance to make a difference. Ethan noticed the change in his mother, too. He saw her smile more, laugh more, and face challenges with a calm strength. When he struggled with his health or schoolwork, Jessica reminded him of Morgan's story, how even the most successful people carried scars and memories. "It's okay to ask for help," she'd say. "It's okay to be seen." Ethan grew more confident, inspired by his mother's resilience. Months passed, and Jessica's reputation for kindness and professionalism grew. She was promoted to lead flight attendant, a role that allowed her to shape the culture of her team. She introduced new training sessions focused on empathy and inclusion, sharing real stories from her own life and from passengers she'd met. The airline noticed a shift. Passenger satisfaction rose and complaints dropped. One day, Jessica was assigned to a flight with a new trainee, a young woman named Priya. Nervous and eager to please, Priya made a mistake during boarding, accidentally spilling coffee on a passenger's expensive suit. The man erupted in anger, demanding to speak to a supervisor. Priya was on the verge of tears, but Jessica stepped in, apologizing sincerely and offering to have the suit cleaned at the airline's expense. After the flight, Priya thanked Jessica for her support. "I thought I was going to be fired," she admitted. Jessica smiled, remembering her own early days. "We all make mistakes," she said. "What matters is how we respond and how we help each other grow." Priya nodded, her confidence restored. Jessica realized that her greatest impact was not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments of encouragement and understanding. Meanwhile, Morgan Freeman continued his advocacy work, often referencing his experience with Jessica in interviews and speeches. He spoke about the importance of humility, of recognizing the humanity in everyone. "We are all travelers," he'd say, "each carrying our own baggage, some visible, some hidden. The greatest kindness is to help each other carry it." Jessica's story reached people far beyond the airline. She was invited to speak at conferences and community events, sharing her journey from shame to redemption. She spoke honestly about her mistakes, her fears, and the lessons she'd learned. Audiences were moved by her vulnerability, and many found the courage to confront their own biases and regrets. At home, Jessica and Ethan's life slowly stabilized. The community fundraiser helped cover Ethan's medical bills, and the support from friends and neighbors eased Jessica's burden. She found joy in small things: Ethan's laughter, a thank you note from a passenger, a quiet evening spent reading. She realized that happiness was not about perfection, but about connection and growth. One evening, as Jessica tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, "Mom, do you think people can really change?" Jessica thought of Morgan, of herself, of all the passengers she'd met. "Yes," she said softly, "I think we change a little every day with every choice we make. And sometimes it just takes one moment, one act of kindness to start." As the years passed, Jessica's influence continued to grow. She became a mentor, a leader, and a friend to many. She never forgot the lesson she'd learned from Morgan Freeman and his battered handbag. That dignity is not about appearances, but about the courage to see and honor the humanity in everyone. Jessica's story began to ripple outward in ways she never expected. One day, she received a letter from a young man who had been on her flight with Morgan Freeman. He wrote about how witnessing her humility and Morgan's grace had changed his perspective. He'd been struggling with anger and resentment, but that day he saw the power of forgiveness and kindness. "You reminded me that everyone deserves a second chance," he wrote. Touched, Jessica realized that her actions, even the ones she regretted, could inspire others to grow. She kept the letter in her purse, a reminder that every day was an opportunity to make a difference. She encouraged her team to share their own stories, creating a culture of openness and support. The crew became more than colleagues. They became a family, united by a shared commitment to compassion. Jessica's relationship with her son deepened as well. Ethan, now a teenager, often volunteered with her at community events. He spoke about his own struggles with illness and how his mother's strength had helped him persevere. Together, they became advocates for families facing hardship, raising awareness and funds for those in need. Their bond, forged in adversity, became a source of hope for others. Meanwhile, Morgan Freeman continued to champion the cause of dignity and empathy. He invited Jessica and Ethan to join him at several charity events, where they shared their story with audiences around the world. Jessica was nervous at first, but Morgan's encouragement gave her confidence. She spoke from the heart, her words resonating with people from all walks of life. At one event, a woman approached Jessica in tears. She confessed that she had once judged others harshly, but after hearing Jessica's story, she vowed to change. "You showed me that it's never too late to be kind," she said. Jessica hugged her, grateful for the chance to make a difference. She realized that redemption was not just for herself, but for anyone willing to open their heart. Jessica's work at the airline continued to flourish. She was promoted again, this time to a role where she could shape company policy. She advocated for better training, more support for staff, and programs to help employees facing personal challenges. Her efforts led to real change, higher morale, better service, and a reputation for excellence. Despite her success, Jessica remained humble. She never forgot the lesson of the battered handbag or the moment she'd let her own stress cloud her judgment. She knew that growth was a lifelong journey and that every day brought new opportunities to learn and to serve. She continued to mentor new hires, reminding them that every passenger had a story worth hearing. As the years went by, Jessica and Morgan stayed in touch. They exchanged letters and phone calls, sharing updates on their lives and their work. Morgan often sent words of encouragement, reminding Jessica that her story mattered. "You turned a moment of shame into a lifetime of service," he wrote. "That is true greatness." Jessica's legacy grew, not just within the airline, but in the wider world. Her story was featured in magazines and documentaries, inspiring countless people to look beyond appearances and to treat others with dignity. She received awards and honors, but what mattered most to her were the quiet moments. A smile from a passenger, a thank you from a colleague, a hug from her son. One day, as she walked through the airport, Jessica saw a young flight attendant struggling with a difficult passenger. She stepped in, offering support and guidance. Later, the young woman thanked her, saying, "You made me feel seen. You made me believe I could do this." Jessica smiled, knowing that the cycle of kindness would continue. Years passed, and Jessica's influence continued to grow. She was invited to speak at international aviation conferences, where she shared her story and the lessons she'd learned from Morgan Freeman. Her message was always the same. Every person you meet is carrying something you can't see. Treat them with kindness, and you might change their life and your own. At one conference, a senior airline executive approached Jessica. He confessed that he'd once believed efficiency mattered more than empathy, but her story had changed his mind. He promised to implement new training programs focused on compassion and understanding. Jessica felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing her journey was making a difference far beyond her own airline. Back at home, Ethan graduated from high school with honors. He credited his mother's resilience and Morgan's encouragement for his success. At the graduation ceremony, Jessica sat in the front row, tears in her eyes, as Ethan accepted his diploma. Afterward, he hugged her tightly. "You taught me to never give up, Mom," he whispered. "No matter what." Jessica's heart swelled with pride. She realized that her greatest legacy was not the awards or recognition, but the example she'd set for her son. She had shown him that mistakes could be transformed into opportunities for growth, and that compassion was the most powerful force in the world. One summer, Jessica received an invitation to a special event in Los Angeles. Morgan Freeman was being honored for his humanitarian work, and he wanted Jessica and Ethan to attend as his guests. The event was filled with celebrities and dignitaries, but Morgan made sure Jessica felt at home. He introduced her to the audience, sharing the story of their first meeting and the lesson they'd both learned. Jessica spoke briefly, her voice steady. "I once judged a man by his bag, not knowing the story it held. That moment changed my life. It taught me that we all carry burdens, and that kindness can heal even the deepest wounds." The audience rose in a standing ovation, many moved to tears. After the event, Morgan and Jessica sat together, reflecting on their journeys. "You know," Morgan said, "sometimes the smallest moments have the biggest impact. I'm grateful for that flight. And for you." Jessica smiled, her eyes shining. "I'm grateful too. You showed me that redemption is possible, and that we can all choose to be better." As the years went on, Jessica continued her work, always striving to see the humanity in everyone she met. She trained hundreds of flight attendants, each one carrying her message into the skies. She volunteered in her community, helped families in need, and supported Ethan as he pursued his dreams. Jessica's story became a beacon for others, proof that even a moment of shame could lead to a lifetime of service. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she faced each day with hope, courage, and a heart open to change. Years later, Jessica stood at the airport window, watching planes take off into the golden evening sky. She was now a senior leader at the airline, respected for her wisdom and compassion. New recruits often sought her out, eager to hear the story of the day she met Morgan Freeman and how it changed her life. She always told it honestly, never hiding her mistake, always emphasizing the lesson. Ethan, now a young man, had become a pilot. He often flew the same routes Jessica once worked as a flight attendant. On his first solo flight, he called her from the cockpit, his voice full of pride and gratitude. "I carry your story with me, Mom," he said. "I try to see every passenger the way you taught me." Jessica's heart overflowed with love and pride. One afternoon, Jessica received a letter from Morgan. He wrote about his travels, the people he'd met, and the stories he'd heard. He thanked her again for her kindness and for reminding him and the world that dignity and empathy matter more than status or appearance. "We are all connected by the burdens we carry," he wrote. "Thank you for helping me carry mine." Jessica framed the letter and hung it in her office, a daily reminder of how far she'd come. She knew that her journey had not been easy, but it had been meaningful. She had turned a moment of humiliation into a legacy of hope, teaching others that redemption is always possible. At the airline's annual gala, Jessica was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. As she accepted, she looked out at the crowd, her colleagues, her son, and even Morgan, who had come to surprise her. She spoke from the heart. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we grow from them and how we treat others along the way. Every day, we have the chance to choose kindness." The audience rose in applause, many wiping away tears. Jessica felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that her story would live on, not just in awards or headlines, but in the quiet acts of compassion carried out by those she had inspired. As the night ended, Jessica and Morgan stood together beneath the stars. They spoke of journeys, of burdens, and of the power of a single moment to change everything. Jessica realized that the greatest gift she had received was not forgiveness, but the chance to help others find their own path to redemption. And so Jessica's story became a legend, not just in the airline, but in the hearts of all who heard it. It was a story of transformation, of moral justice, of the hidden struggles of everyday people. It was a reminder that we are all more than what we carry, and that the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.